Cop, you're lying.
Kia Jiajin coldly snapped.
HMPH. I knew you'd say that. But what evidence do you have to prove I'm lying? Just because someone attacked me?
Of course not.
Kyo. Jiajin smiled faintly.
Although I don't know the reason, everyone's stories so far have been somewhat connected. There are many shared characters in these stories. If we ignore the geographical locations, everyone's accounts are reasonable.
So what?
The problem lies right here.
Kyo Jiajin pointed at the lawyer, Zheng Chen's.
Your story and the lawyer's story share a common character, the scammer, who swindled 2 million. But your stories contradict each other, which means one of you is lying.
Officer Lee paused for a moment and asked.
Where's the contradiction?
Kyo Jiajin shook his head and looked at Officer Lee.
Lawyer, Zhang is preparing for a trial, which means in her story, the suspect has already been caught, but you're still on stakeout, meaning in your story, the suspect is still at large. Isn't that a contradiction?
Officer Lee pondered for a moment before speaking.
I have to admit, your point has some merit. But I think you're being influenced by this game. First, you need to understand a major premise. Everyone who told the story earlier is from a different city. In other words, even if our experiences seem similar, we're definitely not talking about the same event. Since they're different events, naturally, there will be different outcomes.
Kia Sha silently watched the two arguing, not intervening. Yes, argue. The fiercer, the better. As long as either of them votes against the other, the liar wins. After all, the rules are absolute. If anyone other than the liar casts a wrong vote, everyone else will be doomed. Although Officer Lee had provided an explanation, Kyo Jiajin's words still lingered in everyone's minds. After all, this was the first time someone had discovered a contradiction between two stories. Kisha couldn't help but look at Kyo Jiajin, the troublemaker, with newfound respect. Despite his unruly appearance, he was smarter than he seemed.
Well, it's my turn.
A girl spoke up. Everyone turned their attention to her. This girl had let out a piercing scream when the first death occurred. Now, she seemed to have calmed down, though her gaze still avoided looking around.
Hello everyone. My name is Lin Chen, and I'm a psychological counselor.
Kiyosha paused slightly because of the name. Lin Chen was quite interesting. Before the Tang Dynasty, Lin Chen meant apple. These two characters were poetic and left a deep impression. Perhaps Miss Lin's parents wanted their daughter to have a unique name, but this name would likely be her downfall here. Among the people present were writers, teachers, lawyers, doctors, and police officers, all of whom might know the meaning of Lin Chen. Just repeating this name a few times in their minds would make Lin Chen's story unforgettable. Lin Chen noticed the lack of reaction from the group and continued, covering her mouth and nose.
I'm from Ningxia. Before coming here, I was waiting for a client, a kindergarten teacher.
Everyone glanced at the kindergarten teacher named Zhao Ran, as yet another connection emerged in the story.
According to her, the kindergarten teaching industry is very challenging these days. You can't hit or scold the children. Parents treat kindergarten teachers like nannies, and the children treat them like servants. Every classroom is equipped with surveillance cameras, allowing parents to monitor in real time. If your tone is even slightly harsh, the parents will call the principal immediately. But isn't the point of sending children to kindergarten to help them develop their values? If teachers can't be strict, how will the children recognize their mistakes? She felt that she had been in a state of confusion and depression for a long time. So, I prepared a 1-month treatment plan for her. But for some reason, the client never showed up, and I waited in my office. When the earthquake hit, I had no chance to escape. After all, my office was on the 26th floor. The higher the floor, the stronger the tremors. I felt the entire building shaking. I never knew Ningxia could have earthquakes. This This was my first experience. Later, I vaguely remember the ceiling collapsing, and then everything went black.
After hearing Lin Qin's story, everyone seemed to have new thoughts. Kia Jiajian was the first to speak.
I have two questions.
Go ahead.
Lin Qin replied, still covering her mouth and nose.
You mentioned that every classroom has surveillance. What do you mean by that?
No one expected Kyojin to focus on this detail, but Lin Qin, being a psychological counselor, patiently explained.
I think the reason for installing surveillance is to allow parents to see what's happening in the classroom from anywhere.
Oh, so it's closed-circuit TV. Must be a high-end kindergarten.
Kyojin muttered to himself before asking,
Is the kindergarten teacher you were supposed to meet the same person as Zhao? Ran here.
I don't know.
Lin Qin shook her head.
I only added her on WeChat. We were supposed to discuss the details during our meeting.
WeChat?
Kyojin looked puzzled, as if he didn't understand. Officer Li interrupted.
Troublemaker, here you go again. Zhao Ran is in Yunnan, and this Lin Qin is in Ningxia. Who would travel such a long distance to see a psychological counselor?
Kyojin didn't back down.
I just think there's something suspicious. This is the first time someone's story has mentioned another participant.
Dr. Zhao, who had been silent, nodded in agreement.
Zhao Ran was your reason for seeking a psychological counselor, the same as what Lin Qin described.
Well,
Zhao Ran hesitated before saying,
not exactly. I was feeling depressed because a parent had been criticizing me for a long time. ...
That just proves it's a coincidence.
Dr. Xiao nodded.
After all, these are two different regions. There's no need to force a connection.
At this point, everyone fell silent, but Lawyer Zhang suddenly spoke up.
Miss Lin, half of your story is about that kindergarten teacher. Isn't that against the rules?
Huh.
Lin Qin was slightly taken aback.
I mentioned the kindergarten teacher to help. You all better understand my work.
Don't misunderstand. I don't mean anything by it.
Zhang Chen smiled.
What I'm saying is, if that kindergarten teacher's experience was fabricated by you, it would naturally differ from Zhao Ran's story, and that would prove you're lying.
You.
Lin Qin hadn't expected this woman to be so aggressive. She could only defend herself.
Dr. Xiao and Officer Li both said it earlier. We're from different provinces. It's just a coincidence.
A coincidence? Zhang Chen's crossed her arms and continued.
Think about it carefully. Why were the 9 of us specifically chosen to be here? Don't forget, we're all strangers. If we're supposed to find flaws in each other's stories, there must be some clues given to us. And this clue is that all our stories are interconnected. After hearing everyone's stories, I feel like we were specially selected. This way, we can easily find the flaws in each other's stories and identify the liar. Otherwise, this game would be too absurd, because the liar would have an overwhelming advantage.